Good afternoon, class. Welcome to the Appia project part 2. So, useful items for this assignment are going to be a second printout of the first Appia platform project. And as per usual, corkback ruler, X-Acto knife, extra blades, super glue, Super 77, right? Craft glue, tacky glue, rubber cement, if you have it, can also be useful. It will take the place of the spray adhesive, right, for connecting flat to flat. Some other things you might find useful for this part of the project are your Bristol tablet. This is not necessary, and I'll tell you why in a little bit, but color pencils might be a way you want to go, or markers, or you have some pretty fancy papers lying around the house. So where'd I put those at? There they are. All right, you might remember me showing you these top of the semester, whenever the heck that was, years and years ago. Different craft papers from Michael's might be useful. I know we can't get there now because of quarantine, but if you have anything colorful construction-wise lying around the house, it might be useful. A couple different textures, different colors, all could be useful if you happen to have access to them. If you don't have access to them, something you might find interesting in this process is if you have any old publications lying around the house. Any old magazines or newspaper articles, clipping, anything that'll give you an extra sense of color and texture is going to be useful for this part of the assignment. So I did a little bit of searching. I had some extra National Geographics lying around the house. So let me tell you what we're going to do first here. So by this point in time, you have already created your platforms, and you have already put them into a unique scenic setting, right? The next step of this process is, now you've got this model sketched out, we're going to take it a little further by adding color and some other found elements to help push this concept forward. So what we're going to do is make another set of platforms, but once the platform has been cut out, you are going to adhere it to an extra bit of information. So I've got this silver paper here that I've made a model with, and I'll show you that in a second. Rather, I'm sorry, gang, this is gold, not silver. And I'll show you that model in a minute. So, in searching through these magazines, I was able to find a couple different kind of textures. Let's look closer, right? So this texture feels interesting. Let's find out a couple ones here. Anything that feels like a little bit of an organic breakup, right? Like something like these flowers below, that felt really nice as a large organic bit of patterning. Right, this idea of kind of mottled foliage would either work well for covering these platforms or maybe as part of a backdrop. Showed you that one already. Got a couple in here. I missed it. Here it is. You know, simply this idea of earth can be transformed into a platform covering. What else? I got a couple more in here that I think are pretty interesting. Are they in this one? No, let's transfer on. In this particular magazine, I found quite a few that I thought were interesting, that I think will make interesting textures. So like this guy folds out entirely. Look at all these piles of clothes here, right? All that color, all that texture would make for an interesting bit of covering on your platforms. Let me get to where I found, yes, in this article, I found this kind of really beautiful ice pattern. This is under the Arctic. But that pattern is interesting, so let's go ahead and take that pattern and let's apply it to some of our platforms. So what I did is I kind of prepped this already for you. You can see here, I've already gone ahead and adhered 1, 2, 3 forms on the back side of this page, so that when I cut these out to refold them again, I'll get some interesting texture. And if by adding this texture and then putting together in a very specific kind of pattern, perhaps we'll get something really interesting and texturally better than just our friend the Bristol platform, right? So I had made this with that gold paper, so you can kind of see where we'll be heading in a minute. So let's go ahead and get these cut out and see what it looks like. X-Acto knife. I'm going to go ahead and just cut out this page here. Okay, and I've gone ahead and done a couple more on this page, so you can see here. Back side, it's going to be the front side. I think I've got one more hiding out on the back here. Certainly do. I'm going to go ahead and take that too. Right, now I'm going to get rid of this magazine, and now we can begin some light cutting. Typically, because like if you decide to use a magazine or newsprint or any other kind of paper, that is going to be thin enough to where you can probably not use your corkback ruler. It's the first time you'll ever hear me say that. Carefully drag your knife edge right next to your Bristol piece. Put our waste off to the side there. So now you can see, once I flip it over, oh, it's almost like it's got a really cool scenic treatment on it. So the way then, because we know in order to score this and fold it down, we need to follow our lines, right? Instead of doing it on this side, we're going to go ahead and flip it art side up, and then we'll go ahead and connect the dots once again, right? So from corner to corner, corner to corner, corner to corner, corner to corner. So, nice scoring, not too heavy-handed with a knife. Same idea as Appia Part 1, right? You're going to make these platforms. You will have put your handout already on Bristol. So, same process as Appia 1, and then you're just going to give your platform an extra coating of art here, right? And I believe I've got one more to do here. Now, let's see how it folds up and what it looks like. Oh, that's very cool. All right, and simply here, just by adding a little extra texture, you will have given your model some extra life here to help push it forward past the stage of white model into a further bit of conceptualization, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and get some of these other platforms cut out. We can begin to see how they're gonna fit together, okay? Let's go ahead and clear some space here. Once again, you can see my knife is just riding along the raised edge of that Bristol, having to not use your corkback ruler. Just be careful you don't overcompensate and cut across a platform, because that's always sad. Now, depending on what your concept is, you can pick solid colors, whereas I have opted for kind of this interesting, organic, natural pattern. It's entirely up to you. After you've got your sketch put together of your Appia model, only you can decide where you want to take it. And I used rubber cement to adhere this magazine page to the Appia cutouts. You can also use your spray adhesive. Just remember to open a window and make sure your workspace is covered so you don't get that spray glue everywhere. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and flip this over. Flip this guy over. All right, so you can see we got some really interesting large scale, small scale, organic shape happening. I'm going to go ahead and score these and get them folded so we can see what the whole platform looks like as a whole. Set this guy over here for a second. Go ahead and score this. Once you're scored, right, you're going to fold them and glue them just as you previously did with the last project. And once these platforms live together, they're going to look like they exist in the same world because they have the same texture. You can do different colors and color blocking on your platforming if you want to make it feel less homogeneous. You know what I mean? It just depends on what you want to do. All right, so then you start letting these live together in different ways. This comes down here. It's gonna look pretty cool when it's all said and done. Right, almost like someone did some really big paint splotches on there. It feels like it could be a large fossil bed, if it's like an exterior canyon type situation. It just gives us extra information that isn't a bit of white Bristol board, right? Got a couple over here. Go ahead and get these cut out real quick. When using the knife, make sure your fingers are always away from the blade, right, off to the side and just behind. I'm sure that you've all grasped this by now as we've been moving through these projects. It's just nice to remind you. A couple more cuts here and one more right there. We go. Boom. There. And so the reason I showed you the color pencils earlier, or if you have markers, or maybe some watercolor, or early on in the semester we had talked about different kind of acrylic paint, feel free to use any of those mediums to give yourself color and texture as well. If you can't find a magazine, or if you can't get a printout of a texture you find interesting, doing it yourself with a little bit of added artistic flair is completely fine. You can take one of these platforms that you've made, and you could just paint it all one color. You could get dabs on there. You could probably do something that would look remarkably close to this if you paint the whole thing, navy blue, and then come back and daub white on top of it, right? So you have options to get the color blocking that you want, whether it is a magazine or a newspaper, or whether it's you playing around with some different mediums like the color pencils or other kinds of paint or something like that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and score these, right? So that means we're going to flip it, check to make sure that all of our lines are square like they are. Once that's done, let's go ahead and connect those dots side to side. It's good to use the cork back for this and not freehand it, just to make sure that you're making a straight line from one corner to the other. And so what you're going to do once you have all of this information clad in something that you are happy with, right? Something that helps take your design story forward past past our little white platforms. You're going to go ahead and recreate the model you've just done with this new idea of color and texture. And I'll show you an example of that in 1 second. Get these folded down. All right, I am currently not gluing because I want to save a little bit of time in this video. So I'm just trying to get the fold done right so I can show you how they might want to fit together. Nice and tight fold there. All right, but you would glue them just as you did before. Okay, so let's see here. Just from above, let's see if we can't figure out how these fit together texturally with this new kind of right, so we can just see oh, excuse me, gang. So this is just a couple platforms. It's not the total sum of the platforms you'll be making, but already look at how much more interesting that is than that, right? So in the last video, I showed you a couple different variants of like my version of the Appia project. So let me show you where I ended up. Let me get these over here. So the models that I had shown you previously look like this, right? There's this one here, which was a couple extra bits of Bristol to make some higher walls, but all the platforms are the same. I had some dowel rod, those sticks you see in the back, just to help create some extra vertical negative space between things, right? So that was fun and interesting. And then I showed you this model, which was an example of finding an image for a backdrop that you really enjoyed, creating an interesting looking bit of platforming, and then we've also added to it the system of portals around the outside edge of this playing space here. After this, I also showed you this particular piece here, which is a bit unorthodox, right? So the platform's doing something a bit more sculptural than sculptural asymmetrically and vertically, as opposed to acting as platforms on the deck, right? Kind of split it 50-50 here. And I wanted to take one of these models to a finished step, right? To elevate it from blank Bristol to something that feels more like a completed scenic design, right? So as I started looking at this kind of moon and tree backdrop that I found, I really enjoyed a lot of what that forest felt like, and I wanted to try to continue that forest and bring it forward into the space. And then I was like, what could I do with this information down here? What kind of texture would it want? And I started going through some of the things I had lying around the house, and once again I found this gold leaf here, and I had found this little bit of paper that I had lying around. It feels kind of like pebbles, kind of like a rocky floor. So what I decided to do was make a really abstract idea of a forest, maybe that we could play like A Midsummer Night's Dream in, or maybe it's some really cool opera. So I took this model and then I remade it, clad in the gold, and it ended up looking like this. All right, so I clad it in gold, and then I added some sticks from my backyard, and I think it turned out pretty cool. Like, there's a lot of information happening in here. So I got those sticks and placed them foreground, background, kind of juxtaposed. We have a scale figure as well, right? Like in all of our models, we want to make sure that we understand how large things are when we're looking at them in scale. So that's what I made, gang. And as per usual, if you guys have questions moving forward on this, give me a ring, give me a holler. I'll be glad to help you out at any time. And I can't wait to see what you bring. Have a good afternoon, guys. Talk to you soon.